Okay, good evening, everybody. We are very thankful to have you join us this evening. There are still a few participants who are connecting to audio, so we're just going to give it another minute or so to let people get through the waiting room and into our meeting room and connected to audio. Okay. So we did get a very large number of RSVPs, and people are still coming into the waiting room. But we'll just give it another few seconds and then we'll get started. And then for those who show up a little bit later, we'll do a slow start, and hopefully then everybody gets in. So thanks for your patience, and we're excited to get started. Okay, I think everybody's in the waiting room. Looks like they're all connected. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, okay, we'll get started. All right, well, welcome. Dana, do you want to bring up the PowerPoint? Great. So hopefully all of you are here to learn a little bit more about the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan, because that's what we will be speaking about tonight. My name is Gladys Cornell, and I'm with AIM Consulting, and we're assisting the project team with the community engagement for this project. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening. You might have noticed that when you joined, you were on mute, and you will be given the large number of people who are joining us this evening. We are going to keep everybody on mute, because anytime you pick up any sort of background noise, it starts to deteriorate the sound quality for the participants. So you want to move to the next slide, Dana? Okay, so just a couple of things. I know probably most of you have done at least 100 Zoom meetings since COVID. But I wanted to share a few things with you. First of all, this meeting is being recorded. The reason we're recording it are twofold. One is we're going to take the presentation and make it available on BCAG's website. So if any of your friends, family, colleagues have an interest in hearing the presentation or seeing the presentation, you'll be able to direct them to the website so they can see that. Again, if you have any connection issues that you might consider closing all of your applications other than obviously Zoom, and that will probably help with your connections. Also, we definitely want to hear from you. We do have a couple of live polls that we'll be doing this evening. That we have a couple of questions for you, but we really want to hear your questions and comments as well. To make it easy for everyone, we are recommending that you use the chat box, and that is located at the bottom of your screen. If you click that now, it'll pop up for you, and you can type any questions, any comments that you have. Please make sure you're sending it to everyone. That way we can all see it, and two, we can keep track of the questions. We will be here until at the latest 6:30. So hopefully we can get through all of your questions, but if not, we will definitely be following up with those questions and making that available on the website as well. One other quick little thing, Chris Devine, who I'll be introducing a little bit later, he's the BCAG planning director, and he's also the BCAG's project manager for this project. And if you have any questions or comments that you have after the workshop, please feel free to send him an email, and his email address is cdevine@bcag.org. And yeah, and he will respond to those questions. Also, if you want to encourage others to become aware of this project, please have them go to the website or send Chris an email letting him know of your interest, and he will make sure that you're on the email distribution list for future meetings and future information. If you're here with us tonight, you are on that list. So don't worry about that. We've got you. Okay, next slide. All right, so the agenda this evening, I will introduce the project team, and then we're going to do a quick little live poll to hear from you a couple of questions and let us know kind of who's joined us this evening. And then we'll do a overview of the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan. We are going to also provide an overview of the Valley Rail Program, which is further south of this line. And then we will walk through the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan and present to you the train service planning and implementation, as well as give you some information about the stations, the layover facilities, and the track improvements. Then we'll have a couple of live poll questions that we would like to pose to you. And then we'll spend the rest of the meeting going through any of your questions that you may have. Again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and put them into the chat box. I see people already doing that. You don't need to wait. And so good demonstration for those participants who have already done it. Just go ahead and put them in there. Again, we will in all likelihood, if we haven't answered your question in the presentation, we'll go through it during the Q&A and make sure you get your questions answered. Those that we can answer. This is still very, very early in the process, but yes, okay. So next slide, please. Okay, introduction of the project team. So folks that are here this evening and who are heading up this project include John Clark. He's the Executive Director for the Butte County Association of Governments, or BCAG. Chris Devine, the Planning Director for Butte County Association of Governments. Dan Levitt is the Manager of Regional Initiatives for the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission. Daniel Kraus is the Project Manager on the consultant side, and he works with AECOM. And then Daniel Hartman is the Project Engineer who's also with AECOM. That's your project team. And those are the folks you'll be hearing from tonight. So with that, we're going to do our first live poll. And if we can bring the questions up. Okay, you should have the live poll questions up. And so the first question is, where are you from? And we have a bunch of, and you guys are doing it. This is great. So we will just give that a little time. We have Chico, Gridley, Oroville, Paradise, Marysville, Yuba City, Plumas Lake, somewhere else in Butte County, somewhere else in Yuba County, somewhere else in Sutter County, or other. If you are clicking other, if you wouldn't mind just sharing in the chat box where you're from, we would really appreciate it. So thank you. And it's nice to hear that we're getting some folks from Sacramento as well. That's great. And it sounds like you travel frequently to Chico, so I can see your interest in this project. We're also curious if you've ever ridden passenger rail before. And so if you put yes or no on that one, we would appreciate that as well. And so we'll give it a little bit of time. Sylvia, it's okay if you've lost it, if you've already participated. We'll be sharing the results and it'll pop back up for you. Okay. And it looks like a number of folks are using the chat box to answer the questions. So we appreciate you giving us that information in the chat box. So it looks like we've slowed down on the polling. So I think we can close it and share the results. And yeah, we've got a nice distribution of participants kind of throughout the Butte County area, and some in Marysville and Yuba City. and then some in Sacramento. So that's great. And just looking at the question about, have you ridden passenger rail before? Significant number of you have, a few of you haven't. So glad to have everybody, whether you've had the experience or not. I'm glad you're here this evening. So, okay, with that, I'll close this up and we'll move on. So I'd like to ask John Clark to unmute himself and introduce BCAG.
Okay, thank you, Gladys. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So just to give you a little background about our agency, BCAG, or Butte County Association of Governments, we're the federally designated metropolitan planning organization. We're also the designated regional transportation planning agency by the state of California. And what those titles mean is we're basically responsible for preparing all state and federal required transportation planning documents, programming documents to allocate funds or program funds for transportation projects here in Butte County. Organization-wise, we're a joint powers agency of the local governments. So that includes the county of Butte, and then we have the cities of Biggs, Chico, Gridley, Oroville, and the town of Paradise. Under our structure, we're governed by a 10-member board of directors. That includes each of the 5 county supervisors, and then it includes 1 city representative from each of the incorporated cities. We're also the owner-operator for Butte Regional Transit, or the B Line, and that service provides both fixed route, paratransit, and intercity rail transit service throughout the cities and the county. And in addition to our federal, state planning requirements, we also do other regional studies that our board of directors or our jurisdictions deem as necessary, such as the North Valley Rail Study. Go ahead into the next slide. So back in 2018, BCAG was having discussions with the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, San Joaquin Joint Powers Agency. They manage the Amtrak San Joaquins and the Altamont Corridor Express commuter service, about looking at extending passenger rail service to Northern California, specifically Butte County. In January of 21, we got coordination between those agencies, Caltrans and Union Pacific, to discuss preparing a grant, a Caltrans grant, to prepare this study. So in summer of 21, we actually submitted for the grant and later received a grant of $500,000 from Caltrans, their Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program, to prepare this study. In the fall of 21, we then circulated a request for proposals to secure a qualified consulting firm. We eventually did hire AECOM, who's here tonight, and they are preparing the North Valley Strategic Plan study. And in January of 22, we actually started this study effort. So with that, I'll go ahead now and turn it over to Chris Devine, our planning director at BCAG.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Yeah, we're going to provide just a quick overview here of the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan before some of our other team members go into a bit more detail on it. But the strategic plan, it's a planning level effort to study a new passenger rail corridor and service that we're calling North Valley Rail, which would extend trains north from Sacramento area to service Butte, Sutter, and Yuba counties. And the strategic plan, it'll define, a service that provides convenient service down to Sacramento, but also extend to the Bay Area and points in the Central Valley and beyond. The plan is also going to identify the needed capital improvements in order to bring rail northward and what those costs will be. And it will provide the foundation for moving the project forward into the environmental clearance phase and then eventually construction. And as John mentioned, Butte County Association of Governments, or BCAG, we're leading the development of this plan on behalf of the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission and San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, who you'll hear from next. Next slide, please. And so just kind of to update you on progress of the plan to date, we've developed most of the initial assumptions just kind of in a preliminary form. And these have included determining the proposed alignment, which would be seeing the trains come up to Chico. We did evaluate a potential alternative to Oroville early on, but found that the Chico route would work and there's a good market there. We've also identified proposed station locations. You can kind of see on the map to the right in Plumas Lake, Marysville, Gridley, and Chico. More on that in just a second. And then we've also conducted train service planning, looking at things like number of trains per day, round trips, and where those trains will initiate and terminate, and those sorts of things. And so those initial assumptions, we've reviewed those over the past year with Union Pacific Railroad staff, and also a project development team that's comprised of city and county representatives from up and down the project corridor. And we've gotten their input on these initial assumptions, and made some adjustments to them to reflect the input from those entities. And I'll just point out that the input from Union Pacific's been particularly important, as the passenger rail trains will be traveling on their tracks and within their right of way. And so we've had some good coordination with them. Next slide, please. Current work that we're doing right now as part of the strategic plan. We're evaluating station location options in Chico. We'll have some more detailed information on that in a minute. And we're also evaluating the Marysville Yuba City station as it relates to the levee. We've identified a station location in Marysville. The Union Pacific Railroad tracks are on top of the levee there, and we want to make sure that any work we do there won't cause any trouble with that levee. So we're coordinating with the Levee Commission and some other groups to make sure that we get their input. We're also currently wrapping up conceptual designs and initial cost estimates. We have a rough cost estimate for implementing the service developed to date, but we're refining that. And then we're also in the process of developing a ridership analysis, which will give us a good indication of the number of passengers to expect from the service. Conducting continued public outreach as always, and then we'll be wrapping up shortly the development of visual simulations, for the different station locations. And we'll actually have some examples of that coming up in the presentation, not for our stations, but examples of like the types of simulations that we'll be doing. And then we're looking at fare pricing and revenues, and then also taking a close look at a possible longer-term connection to the Sacramento Valley Station, which is located kind of near downtown in Sacramento, kind of by I-5 and I Street, and looking to the long-term to be able to connect there. So next slide, please. And so this is the project schedule, kind of a simplified version. You can see that in 2022, we completed that initial service planning in April. Didn't mention earlier, sorry, that we did work with Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transportation to do operations modeling. That was a key component that provided us with some really good input on our initial assumptions. That was completed September of 2022. And then you can see that the tasks that I was just referring to, most of the current work that we're doing, we anticipate to be completed kind of in the March to May timeframe. And once we complete those tasks, those are all going to funnel into the draft plan, the draft, passenger rail strategic plan, which we expect to have completed towards August. And at that time, we plan to have another community workshop, probably just like this one, to share the findings of the draft plan and the details, and to receive additional input from the public and anybody that's interested. And then our goal is to have the plan completed towards October, November. And so that's kind of just a generalized version of the schedule. And next slide, and I'm going to pass it over now to Dan Levitt from the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission and San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. He's going to talk a little bit about their Valley Rail program that's underway down in the San Joaquin Valley and Sacramento areas.
Great, thank you, Chris. So could you stay on that other slide for a minute? Yeah, so as noted, I do represent two agencies: the San Joaquin Regional Rail Commission, who's the owner operator of the Altamont Corridor Express, the ACE commuter rail service, and then also the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, who's the managing agency for the San Joaquin's intercity passenger service. Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. This figure shows you the route for the San Joaquin's. In the orange is the rail portion of the route, which goes from Sacramento to Bakersfield and from Oakland to Bakersfield. We typically run 7 round trips. 2 of those go from Sacramento to Bakersfield, and 5 from Oakland to Bakersfield. And then in addition, you see on this figure that the green and the blue lines, those are throughway bus routes, which go throughout California, connecting to the rail service, including the route from Sacramento that goes up this corridor all the way up to Redding. This is an intercity service running on freight tracks. It's funded by the state of California. It is operated by Amtrak, and my agency took over the management in 2015. If you go to the next slide. This figure shows the Altamont Corridor Express, which we refer to as ACE. It's unlike the San Joaquins, which is focused on non-commute. This service is really primarily commuters that utilize ACE during weekday service, 4 round trips during the weekdays, taking passengers from their homes to their jobs in the Silicon Valley, both from San Joaquin County and the Northern Valley area, and from the Tri-Valley area to the Silicon Valley. Those are our biggest markets. It's been operating for over 20 years. If you go to the next slide. This figure shows you what we call our Valley Rail program, which is a joint expansion program from my 2 agencies and 2 services working together to expand both ACE and San Joaquin services, to extend ACE up from Stockton all the way to Sacramento, and to extend ACE down to Merced as well, and to expand the San Joaquin service, the round trips to Sacramento and to the Bay Area as well. Each of the yellow dots you see on here, those are new stations which will be implemented as part of this Valley Rail program. Over the last 5 years, we've secured about $1.6 billion for this expansion program. Most of that is state funding, and we have completed the California environmental review process for this program, and are in the process of doing the final design and looking to start construction within the next year. If you go to the next slide. This figure shows you our route extension coming up north from the valley to Sacramento. And it's on the green. What you see is the green and purple line is the line that will be running the expanded service on. That's the Sacramento subdivision. It's owned by UP. Further to the east, you'll see a blue line that has the dash line. That's the line the San Joaquins have traditionally run on to Sacramento that goes to Sac Valley Station. That line is UP's main line, and they had no interest in additional passenger service on that line. We were very fortunate they were willing to work with us on their lightly used Sacramento subdivision that's again to the west. And that line currently has no passenger service on it. We do have to improve the line, and we do have to build new stations on it. An advantage of that line is that it does have the opportunity to serve a number of stations potentially through the Sacramento area. It does not serve Sac Valley Station at this time. The route does, though, go further north, even beyond Sacramento. Right now, our current program terminates at Natomas with an airport connection. The capital area is served by Midtown Station. But as you can see in this line, the purple dash line that continues north, the Sac sub continues on further north. And because that we're already working with UP on bringing passenger rail to this line, they are willing to work with us and with BCAG, Caltrans, other partners like SACOG on looking to see if we could bring additional passenger rail service north from this Valley Rail program on up to Chico. If you go to the next slide. This figure shows you what we're hoping to achieve by the time high-speed rail begins its early operating segment in the San Joaquin Valley between Merced and Bakersfield, scheduled to be around 2030 or around from the period from 2030 to 2033 now. And we're trying to meet each of the high-speed trains at Merced, where we'll have a multimodal station where ACE and San Joaquins will come together with high-speed rail. But we'd like to meet each of those with a train going north, either to Sacramento or to the Bay Area. And we are looking at around the 2030 time period, having about 10 new round trips along the Sacramento sub from the valley coming up to Sacramento. And with this program, we are looking for the planning work to extend 4 of those round trips up to the Chico area, as shown on this figure. And each one of these lines you see here represent a single round trip. You go to the next slide. This just shows you how our Valley Rail program with the extension up to Chico fits into the greater statewide network. So not only connecting passengers to the Sacramento area, but also to the Bay Area, and not just to Merced, but really all the way down to Southern California as well through the connection with high-speed rail and our throughway bus route connections shown in green here throughout the state as well. And then this is my last slide. So I guess now if we go to the next slide, I'll turn over the next part of the presentation over to Daniel Kraus with AECOM.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start talking about the train service planning we engaged in at the beginning of this study for the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan, as well as some of the implementation planning we've been doing. Next slide, please. So the first thing we really looked at when we started the study is looking at the travel markets that we anticipate that would be present for the North Valley service. So, and then once we analyzed some of those travel markets, we started looking at proposed routes. So I'll go over both of those. So in terms of travel markets at the local and regional scale, that would be the North Valley itself, with travel in between the planned 4 stations that were mentioned earlier. And then as you go into an interregional travel, there's multiple destination areas, such as the Sacramento region, which is in close proximity, obviously, to North Valley, as well as the San Joaquin Valley to the south, where you would have also connections to high-speed rail. And beyond the San Joaquin Valley, you would have further connections via thruway buses from a Bakersfield connection down to Southern California. And also the Bay Area market, of course, so which is also in the Northern California region. We also looked at the types of travel people would be engaging in, and looking at commute type travel. There's 2 areas we're really looking at. The primary commuter market for the North Valley is obviously Sacramento, given its proximity. That's a large job center, so that's definitely probably your biggest commute market, but also a secondary commute market to the Bay Area, especially with the rise in hybrid work patterns. We feel that even though it's quite a distance, there could be some people that could live in the North Valley and commute once or twice a week. So that's something we considered in our analysis. And then finally, for both business and leisure, you're going to have destinations throughout this entire region, as well as beyond down to San Joaquin Valley and statewide. So those types of trips go all over to key destinations. Out of that, we've, as we mentioned, there's 4 round trips. So I'll go through the routes that we're looking at for those 4 round trips. The first being first of all, each one of these lines represents a single round trip. So you can see that there's like some dark blue and a dark purple line. There's four in total, and the rest are faded. Those are other services that Dan Love was just talking about in terms of Valley Rail. So the first dark blue line would go from Chico through the Sacramento region and then through the northern part of the San Joaquin Valley down through Tri-Valley and terminate at Union City at a new stop that's also being developed as part of another study, a Union City hub there with a connection to the BART system there. So especially for connections to the southern part of the Bay Area and maybe even to the north, depending on people take BART, where they take BART. A second connection would go from Chico to a stop in Stockton, where there would be also another hub there where folks could transfer to the San Joaquins to get to the Bay Area to Oakland, or they could also transfer in the other direction down to Merced for a connection of high-speed rail. And then we also have 2 direct routes. One of those routes would take the current ACE route south of Stockton and go down to Merced, which ACE is also pursuing an extension to Merced, as Dan mentioned earlier. And then also we would have one of those, a San Joaquin's train travel to the same hub that's being planned in Merced with high-speed rail. So they'll all meet in one place. So that's kind of the routing we're looking at. Next slide, please. Just kind of looking at the corridor by the numbers. It's about a 75-mile-an-hour project corridor. Again, we're looking at 4 new stations and then the 4 round trips we just talked about. I would like to mention now that we are looking at potentially an earlier service that would start with 2 daily round trips, and then we would graduate up to 4 shortly thereafter. In terms of travel times, so on this graphic to the left here, you can see that Chico is about a 90-minute travel time between Chico and Midtown Sacramento. And again, that's kind of that, we see some different types of traveler, a little bit of commute based on, if hybrid work and things like that. It's a little bit outside of normal commute time, but some people would make it given these new work patterns and also just the key destinations in Sacramento. So we feel a lot of people travel for other reasons. As you go down the line, Gridley is 24 minutes away from Chico. So that makes it about a 66-minute travel time between Gridley and Midtown Sacramento. By the way, Gridley's our station, which we would have a bus connection from Oroville area to meet at that station. So that's one of the key purposes of the Gridley station, along with serving that community. And then we have about a 48-minute travel time between the Marysville Yuba City station down to Midtown. Midtown being that central Sacramento station. And then finally Plumas Lake, which is the first station north of the Valley Rail stations. That would be about a 40-minute travel time. And so those two southern stations really are probably in the sweet spot for commute service. And then obviously the trains would continue southward, as we talked about just on the last slide. So the travel time between Chico and Merced is approximately 3.5 hours. And then Chico to the South Bay with that connection to BART at Union City is about a 4-hour trip. And then finally, I also want to mention that, there's by traveling to Natomas on the train from North Valley, you could also utilize the shuttle to the Sacramento International Airport that's being planned as part of the Valley Rail program. It would also be incorporated into the North Valley service. Next slide, please. Just want to give a brief timeline of how this project is going to develop. So to get to the point where we're opening service. So currently we're in that early planning phase where you see in green on the left, and we're looking to wrap this study up around the end of 2023. And then that would be followed by the environmental clearance that Chris had mentioned earlier with some preliminary engineering. That'd be a year or so. And then as we get into the winter of 2025, spring of 2026, we're looking at the final design work and really getting the whole system figured out in terms of detailed design. And then that would be followed by contractor procurement and construction. We might, if we do implement the 2 round trips, we're looking at doing that in 2028. And so there would be kind of a first set of construction to get ready for that. And then and then we would continue construction on additional improvements to further increase the capacity of the corridor to allow for an additional 2 round trips by 2030 for that 4 round trip service that we are shooting for, but not in the midterm horizon. Just a quick note, the overall project cost from a rough order of magnitude, which just again, it's very early in the study and we still have a lot of details to work out in defining improvements, especially track work and that sort of thing. We have to work with the host railroad, Union Pacific, on that. But initial numbers in 2022 dollars, we're looking about approximately $500 million so at this juncture. Next slide. And now I will pass the presentation over to Daniel Hartman. He'll talk more about the details of stations, layover facility, and track improvements.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Next slide. So first, I'm going to talk about the selected station sites, and I'm going to start at the north at Chico and then move south and end at Plumas Lake. For the Chico station, we have 2 sites that we're evaluating, and we're planning to take both of those sites into the environmental phase. One is downtown at the existing Amtrak station, doing some improvements there to allow for this service to come in. And the other location is south of there, adjacent to the Barber Yard, where there's some planned development happening. One of the things that we need to do for an end of the line station, so what Chico will have that none of the others will have, is a layover facility. This accommodates the trains that are stored overnight that start at the north and head south for the first part of their journey, and then also the trains that come up from the south during the morning and stop here and they lay over during the day, and then they head back south during the night. For each of the station options, we have a couple of layover options. The north option is actually about 4 miles to the north. It's the first available spot after the downtown station that has sufficient room outside the freight right-of-way to have some storage tracks for those trains. The south site is adjacent to the Barber Yard station site. There is a possibility that we would be working with the city and with UP as possibly being able to utilize the south option for the layover with the downtown option also. There's a little bit of complexity with turning the trains. It takes a while, and we want to make sure that none of the operations end up closing the streets for an extended period while the trains have to turn around. Next slide. For the Gridley station, the site being studied here is right near the southern portion of town. It's in the central location, accessible from the entire city. It's got some ability for doing some downtown placemaking and revitalization. It also is in direct line with an easy east-west connection over to Oroville for what we anticipate would be the shuttle bus bringing passengers from Oroville that don't want to drive over to Gridley, and increase the ridership at Gridley Station by combining it with people from Oroville. When we were out looking at the site, with the city, we also went down a little bit further to the south to evaluate whether the site that was used for the FEMA campfire temporary housing could be used, but everybody agreed it just didn't have the same advantages to the downtown and a little bit more difficult to get to the station. Next slide. For the Marysville Yuba City station, we're looking at the site right directly in between where the 10th Street and 5th Street bridges come across from Yuba City. It's right behind the little underutilized shopping center, right in the heart there. It's central, adjacent to the downtown, and there's some good TOD opportunity and placemaking opportunity with that site. Again, when we were out walking the sites with the city, we looked at other options south of here and north of here. South, there just proved to be not enough space between Yuba River and the first curve to actually fit the geometry in to get a station. And then north, by the time you get north, you actually are requiring passengers to drive up into that neighborhood, and it just was much more difficult to get to. So we focused on, everybody agreed on the area between 5th and 10th Street. Next slide. The Plumas Lake Station is at the north end of Plumas Lakes, kind of right off of where the Plumas Lake Boulevard goes over Highway 70 and temporarily terminates. It's the first large growing community north of Natomas, located right along Highway 70 and the rail corridor. It can capture some of the riders immediately south of Marysville, like Olivehurst and Linda, because people don't tend to drive backwards to a station to then go north to go south. It's got an approved specific plan with approximately 400 residences, and the area of the station is vacant, owned by the county, and there's some possible opportunities to do some transit-oriented development around the station. We did look at another site on the south end of Plumas Lakes, but it really was in the heart of a residential area, which makes it really difficult to integrate a passenger station. Next slide. So now I'm going to kind of talk about the typicals that you'll see based on what we're implementing in the Valley Rail program. This graphic here is to depict kind of a sample center platform. That is the typical requirement from Union Pacific for all of the stations that are along the corridor, not the end of the line station, but the ones in the middle. They do allow two outside platforms, but from an operational perspective, a single center platform is preferred because you can come to the middle and it doesn't matter which side of the platform the train gets dispatched to, you can get on it. What you're seeing in this graphic is the access. This option, this is a tunnel access. So in the near view, people are coming up a ramp to the platform. Then you're seeing some mini highs. Those are ADA loading zones. There's a low one for the equipment that the ACE runs. And then there's a high one for the equipment that the San Joaquin's runs. They're two different floor heights. And then just past that, you can see the concept of the shelters for the Valley Rail program. Next slide. All right, this is just a sample picture of a side-loaded platform. This would be consistent with what would be anticipated at Chico because it's the end of the line. It doesn't need us two platforms. And here you can see you can get right off the train and walk directly into the plaza area of the station and immediately go to your car or the bus or get picked up. Next slide. This is a sample of a center loaded platform with a passenger bridge access. UP does not allow people to walk across the tracks to get to a platform. Like you'd see, at grade crossings like on Caltrain or something like that. UP does not allow that. So we do have to have grade separated access when you go to a center platform. This one uses stairs and elevators to come up to the bridge level, a bridge that goes across to the station, and then you can use elevators or stairs to get back down and again go to your car or the bus or a rideshare mode. Next slide. This again is a center platform, and like the first slide, this is the tunnel access. So with this, there would be a structure that provides ramps and stairs that come down to a tunnel level. That'll then take you underneath the railroad track and out to a portal that then uses stairs or ramps to get back up to the plaza level. And again, you can head off to your car or take the bus. Next slide. Now, when we're talking about adding passenger service, it's using UP-owned, Union Pacific-owned freight rail tracks. The corridor is mainly single tracked with small sections of double track, which allows trains to pass, north and southbound trains to pass. UP will ask for track improvements to increase their capacity, which then allows them to provide those passenger train slots. And the typical improvements that are asked are upgraded and lengthened double tracking for passing. And then depending on passing locations, they'll ask for new sections of double tracking for passing. And now, and next slide, passing that back to Gladys.
Thank you, Daniel. So we've had a robust conversation in the chat box. We are monitoring all the questions. I realize a number of the ones that you asked early, that the participants asked early on have been answered in the presentation. So when we get to that portion of the Q&A, we'll probably skip over the ones that have been answered and really focus on the other questions. But if there's something that, when we've gotten through the questions, that you feel has not been answered to your interest, then please just send another message in the chat box, and we will get to it. So we do have two questions for you in the live polling. The first question is, what kind of trips do you anticipate taking on the North Valley passenger rail? I know there was several comments about this being strictly commute focused, and it's definitely not. So that's what we want to hear, is we want to hear how you would envision using it. Again, we also heard that there were representatives from Chico State, and that they're excited about the idea of students having the opportunity to utilize the train. So again, we're starting to see the answers coming up, and that's really exciting to see. So thank you for giving that. Again, if you hit other in the poll, if you wouldn't mind just sharing. Oh, and they did work travel. Great, thank you. We would appreciate that as well. So the next question is, where do you anticipate traveling to when using the North Passenger Rail? And the following answers are destinations within Butte, Yuba, and or Sutter County, Sacramento, San Joaquin Valley, Bay Area, Southern California, or other. And if you put other, if you wouldn't mind sharing what that destination is, we would really appreciate that. So we're going to give this a little bit more time. I know we maybe jumped the gun a little bit on our first live poll, so I'm gonna let it go for just a little bit longer and see how it goes. Okay. So now it's looking like, oh, we've had one more participant. Again, I tend to get excited about moving on, so you don't get bored, but I will be a little bit more patient. Okay, I think we have all of the participation, so if you wouldn't mind ending the poll. And we can just, again, sort of look at, so yeah, there's definitely a wide variety. It looks like recreation and leisure is a real interest point, business related and commute, school, and medical, and then several people put other, and they've added their thoughts here. I will let you know all of your comments are going to be captured, and we will be sharing that with the project team. So as they move forward with their technical work, all of your comments will be taken into consideration as well. So again, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts and sharing kind of how you would anticipate using the North Valley Passenger Rail. So I think we can stop sharing that, and we can move on to the Q&A session. So again, as I mentioned, we had considerable discussion going on, and many people anticipated what the presentation was going to be about, and so asked a lot of questions about, where it was going and whether it was connecting into the Bay Area, whether it was going to be connecting. And so I think a lot of those questions have been answered, but I'm going to start with maybe some of the ones that were not answered, or maybe were answered in the chat box. And I just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to hear it in case you don't want to follow in the chat box. So one of the first questions that was asked was anticipating, this is great, but we want to see it go further north. And so will it expand to Reading? Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, I can
that?
jump in and answer that. Sure, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the long-term vision. We certainly don't have any, plans in place right now. I think, as we mentioned, the grant funding that we received is to study, bringing rail northward from Sacramento up into Butte County. But I think we could envision in the future studying that next step of bringing it up towards Reading. Maybe I'll pass it over to Dan Levitt and see if he has some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I just add to that that one of the things that I think that maybe didn't come out as clear in the presentation is that, what we're talking about here is not a final service by 2030. It's really a starter service that then once you have that service in place, then can continue to grow over time as the demand is there. And certainly there's long been desire to build this over time and then to continue to extend it further north. So it would be something that would be a longer term goal to be able to extend up to Reading. And one of the good things about serving Chico as the line to Butte County is that line does extend further up north. And so we just need to be able to continue to get additional funding and work with our partner UP in order to utilize their track to be able to continue service north sometime in the future beyond 2030.
Thank you, Dan. The other question is related to the connection into Sacramento and whether or not that's Natomas or Sacramento. When they say Sacramento, I think they're referring to the Sacramento Valley Station. And there were a number of folks in the chat box who were very interested in, is there going to be the possibility of connecting into the Sacramento Valley Station? So Dan or Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about the connection into the Sacramento Valley Station?
I think I'll let
You can
Dan
start?
handle that.
Okay, all right, I'll start it, and then Chris or John can add in, but again, I think it's kind of fitting in with sort of the last question too, and I think Chris mentioned it a bit in his presentation, that that this current study is looking at that connection, but as a longer term, so something beyond the initial startup service, and part of that is right now there are no slots for this that really would be there between Natomas and Sac Valley Station. So that's something that what we're doing is really providing a starter service that takes advantage of the work that we're already doing with the Valley Rail program and the partnership that we already have with UP, and basically extending upon that. So this is taking slots that are already in the pipeline and just taking them further north. In the future, once you have this service in place, then there's the opportunity, not just for the connection from Chico to Sac Valley Station, but we will also be working with Caltrans and with the city of Sacramento and our partner with the Capital Corridor, JPA, as well, and really trying to figure out how to increase capacity in the corridor between the Sacramento subdivision and Sac Valley Station, and create a new connection, even for our trains coming up north from high-speed rail to connect with Sac Valley Station. But this is, again, viewed as a project that would be sometime beyond 2030.
Okay, thank you. Another question that was asked early on was, do we really have to wait until 2030 to get the train into Chico? And I know we shared kind of the overall schedule, which sort of explains why it takes some time to do that. Do you want to have any sort of follow-up comment on that, Chris or Dan?
I would just say we'd love to have it here sooner, and we feel the same way. It would be such a great service and serve so many different purposes. It'd be great to get it in here sooner. We're going to do all we can to get it in place, by 2030. And we're fortunate in, points north of Sacramento that this partnership is formed between BCAG and San Joaquin JPA and Regional Rail Commission, and that they're willing and kind of able in many ways to extend their services northward. If we were to try to create a service from scratch, with buying trains and so on and so forth, I mean, it would take a much longer time to implement service, north of Sacramento. So I think that the partnership that we forged is going to allow it to happen in 2030, and it's kind of a best case scenario. But that said, again, agree sooner would definitely be better.
And just a quick reminder, we are exploring looking at an earlier service with 2 round trips. We're not sure yet, but we're looking into that right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. So we did have a question with regards to priority populations, both low-income communities and communities of color. And is that part of the consideration when you're developing the strategic plan? How will they be served? How will they be impacted? How is that looked at? Chris, do you want, or Daniel Kraus, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I can jump on it first. Yeah, it's a big consideration. It filled out a big portion of our grant application to Caltrans as to why we envision service, northward up into Butte County as being valuable. The equity of transportation funding hasn't been great historically, and we feel like a project like this helps bring equity to transportation funding and where those state dollars, federal dollars get spent. And there's certainly numerous disadvantaged and low-income communities in Yuba, Sutter, and Butte County. And, this train would directly serve them. We're also, as part of the study, looking at coordinating with the existing public transit service providers, the bus systems, and ensuring that those bus routes will align with the new passenger rail stations such that they're timed to be at the station at the same time as the trains, which would allow, access into those stations from all kind of reaches of those counties where the transit's served. That'd be the kind of the first part of what could probably be a really long answer. I don't know if Daniel wanted to add.
If I could just add just one thing too, I really appreciate the question, and I just want to highlight that with the San Joaquins, well over half of our ridership for the San Joaquins are passengers who have household incomes of 50,000 or less. And so our service is really vital transportation to low-income and disadvantaged communities throughout really the whole Northern California sort of mega region area in the San Joaquin Valley. And so certainly, as Chris mentioned, by not having rail service up to the northern Central Valley, it really is an equity issue. And so we think it's really important as part, and I think the state shares this vision in terms of wanting to see rail service that services part of the state to bring that sort of equity to the northern Central Valley.
Thank you, Dan. And Dan, there is a question I'm hoping you might be able to answer. It's not necessarily related to this, but it talks, the participant wanted to know, why does high-speed rail not go all the way to Sacramento? Could you help sort of give the clarification on that?
High-speed rail is supposed to go to Sacramento. It will, I mean, the idea is someday it will, just like someday it will go all the way to San Diego as well. But right now, in terms of the funding, where the state has the funding available to implement and where construction is underway, the initial piece for the early operating segment between Merced and Bakersfield, that segment is never expected to be the end. It's expected to extend, but the initial extension will be to the San Francisco Bay Area and then down to Southern California to Los Angeles and Anaheim. And so the issue is the Sacramento extension. Right now, there's not a timeline for when that will be implemented. And so for some lengthy period of time, our service will be the connection to Sacramento area, the northern San Joaquin Valley and beyond, and parts of the Bay Area as well. Ultimately, our hope is in some ways that our service would be able to be incrementally improved enough over time, where at some point you'd be able to get a one-seat ride on our service. And this is even before you have sort of a true high speed, but you'd be able to, very much like they're doing from San Francisco to San Jose, where the train is going to run on the Caltrain corridor, that you'd have a same situation on our line where you could be able to run at a reduced speed from Chico, for example, and be able to go all the way down without a transfer is our hope. But more realistically, from Sacramento to Merced and not have to have a transfer down as you go further. That's our goal, to do that as soon as possible. But initially, you would have to have a transfer.
Thank you, Dan. So this question is, I think, was pretty well answered, but I just want to bring it up in case you wanted to add anything onto it as well. It says that the comment is, this seems to be a plan that foresees higher population densities in North Valley. Is there a connection for the increase of population with transportation and other infrastructure projected needs? Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to implement service in 2030, and so I think we're confident that the existing populations in 2030 will support the service that we're aiming to provide. But so yeah, it's really not based on some projection of population necessarily, but more just, it seems to be like really an established need for rail service northward, and also kind of that connection to the Sacramento airport for folks that are up in Yuba City, Marysville, Gridley, Chico, to be able to take the train down to the Natoma station. There'll be a shuttle bus waiting for you there, take you out to the airport. So yeah, it's not necessarily based on projections, but as Dan Levitt mentioned earlier, we expect the service to grow over time. And so while we're looking at 4 trains per day in 2030, down the road, as population grows and demand increases, we aim to have the ability to expand service.
Quick question about the Midtown SAC station. They were wondering, is the Midtown SAC station the former station for the Western Pacific Line? Does anybody know the answer to that question?
It's actually
Dan or Daniel?
It's a new station. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say, if they're referring to the really old station that is kind of right where the old spaghetti factory is, no, it's a little bit south of there. It's actually in the only spot that really can fit a passenger train without closing streets, because of the closure of our street to accommodate the light rail viaduct that goes over. And so it actually has a good, from that location, a good connection into the capital area. It's right by light rail stops. So it's not at the old historic location.
Thank you, Daniel. The next question was related to the line on the map that shows a connection to the Sacramento airport. And they were wondering if that was a bus to the airport. And Chris, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I think I might have answered that earlier. Yes, it is indeed a bus connection, and it'll be part of the Valley Rail project. I think Dan mentioned that earlier. And just to add that it'll be timed with the arrival of the trains, so that you won't have to wait very long for the bus to take you out to the airport.
Okay, I'm going to read this question because I'm not exactly sure what they mean, but how does turning a push-pull train take a while, and are we not looking at using push-pull? Daniel Hartman,
Yeah,
do you want
I can answer that, and the question is related to being able to use the southern layover site with the downtown Chico, and the answer is not really how long it physically takes the operator to walk from one end of the train to the other. It is a push-pull. The result is that it takes time to get permission from UP and the signaling to actually start operating in that direction. And so right now, the typical is 15 to 20 minutes. And we certainly don't want a scenario where we might be in the downtown with gates down for that long. So we're looking at possible station configurations in town that limit that, but again, we won't know that until we get further in the process and work with UP. But it's the time to turn the train around is based on getting the permission to start operating in the opposite direction.
Thank you, Daniel. I think this next question is actually for you as well, because in the discussions about the stations, you talk about placemaking opportunities, and the participant was hoping you could give a little bit more clarity when you talked about the Chico downtown having placemaking opportunities. Can you provide a little clarity as what you mean by that?
I don't know that on my slide, I talked to placemaking in the downtown, but when you're talking about a station placemaking opportunities, some of the sites are areas where having a transit station will key revitalization and being able to utilize that station as a hub, and then having the area around it kind of center. And Dan may, I don't know if you have more to add there, but having stations in areas like where we would envision the Gridley station to be are great opportunities for that community to make the station area nice.
Thank you. The next question is, will passenger trains on these routes have priority over freight? Dan, do you want to answer that question?
Priority over freight is difficult. We are not the owner. The UP is the owner of the line. What we do in order to get treated well is, I mean, we have to basically not only pay for our slots, but we do pay for on-time performance as well. So between the two, by basically working with the freight railroad, we believe on this line, particularly on this one that is relatively lightly used, that we can get a high on-time performance. But it's difficult to get a higher priority than freight when they are the owner of the line. But we do work in partnership. We have a good history on the ACE line, where our on-time performance has been very high over the years, and we hope to continue that with this service as well.
Great, thank you. There was a question, and Daniel Kraus, I know you answered it, but I'm going to do it for those who aren't checking the chat box. They said that they acknowledged the $500 million cost, estimated cost, and they're saying, what is the estimate of annual operating costs? Do you want to just answer your question or just share your answer that you shared in the chat box?
Yeah, so we're partway through the study, and that's one of the items we'll be looking at here shortly. As we get towards the end of the study, that'll be one of the last things we look at. So, but that is part of our work.
Great,
And
thank
again,
you.
it'll be initial level, since this is a planning study. That'll get more further refined as we get into future phases of the project. But yeah, we will definitely kind of get an idea of what the operations will cost.
Okay.
And let me just add one little thing here is when we look at the operating costs, we don't just kind of say, okay, it's going to cost this much to operate. We also look and we can try to understand what the funding opportunities are for that. And so we look at it as a whole, not just what it costs, but also how it can be funded.
Thank you, Daniel. And that goes to this next question. Who pays for the track upgrades and who owns them after they're built? I think we got the answer to the who owns them after they're built, but the track upgrades, who pays for that?
Well, if you look at the current program that we have for Valley Rail and the money that we've gotten, most of the money that we've received for the program has come from state funds. And that's where a lot of the funds are. We certainly are chasing federal funds as well. But the bulk of our funding that we've already received to date has come from state funds. And so Caltrans is our biggest partner for this. And so that I would imagine that would continue. There are any other opportunities we have to go for funding will continue. The infrastructure will be continued to be owned by UP.
Thank you. So this question is related to anticipated fares. What kind of fares are expected one way one way and round trip for, say, Chico and Marysville to Sacramento and San Francisco stops?
I can jump in on that. Again, kind of a similar answer to the last one I answered was we're getting that work underway to look at fares. We'll probably be looking at the existing service and looking at the Valley Rail program and how they're going to approach fares and then build off that. So stay tuned on that. We'll be looking at having some information on that later as well in the study. I don't know, Dan, if you want to add anything to that or that covers it.
No, I think what you said was correct. It would be in line with the fare structure we have currently for ACE and San Joaquin services. And so that's something the team can make available and put on the website in terms of, so you at least can see some sample fares that we currently have between markets of similar distances. I think that would help give it a good idea about what the fare structures are. But we definitely believe our fares are competitive with the alternative modes, and we do have discount programs as well for both ACE and San Joaquin services.
Okay. Would extending north require Chico to expand to a double-sided platform?
Good question.
I knew you'd like that, Dan.
Yeah, actually, the example to that is at the Natoma station. Right now, we are in design. Hopefully, we'll go into construction. Early next year. With the end of the temporary end of the line, the current temporary end of the line at Natoma is a single side platform. Part of this project would require building the other side. And so that would be similar to Chico, where we would make sure that as we implement a station at Chico, we have that in mind. And downtown location is a side platform, and it would require building another platform on the other side to extend north. The Barber Yard site has a little bit of flexibility. We are envisioning a side platform there too. And if it needed additional platform, we can add the same thing there too. The difference is we're not in a downtown environment, so we don't have all the crossings like downtown.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we had some questions about some other locations for stations, like one of the participants asked about Live Oak or Biggs, why they're not included as part of, train stops. And they were mentioning that, like BART has multiple city stops. Why not North Valley Rail? Do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between like a BART experience and the North Valley Passenger Rail and why they're not more additional stops? Chris, start with you.
Yeah, I guess I just lead off by saying that, we're trying to get this initial service in place in 2030, and we're only able to do as many stations as we can between now and then. That's part of the answer. I think I'd probably default to either Daniel or Dan, as they have more experience with kind of the BART situation versus the ACE and the San Joaquins.
Yeah, I mean, these are very different services, and covering very different distances that we're looking at overall. But part of it is that, I mean, BART has its own track that is completely BART track that is fully grade separated. They can run, very, very frequent trains, and only BART trains. There's no freight on the BART line. Whereas, I mean, these are not our track. We're running on an existing UP track that's for freight service. And every station that we implement, we're going to have to implement more infrastructure so that we're not preventing the freight from being able to do their service as well. And so, and the freight trains will only allow a certain amount of stations that are also, because they basically get in the way of their freight train service. So there's a number of things here. This is not in order to have service that's competitive in trip times. The more stations we open up, that slows us down because we don't have express kind of capabilities on this type of line. So it's finding the right mixture that UP will agree to, but also that serves the proper ridership for the costs that are associated with building each of the stations.
Great. Another question is, why not use portions of the SAC Northern Railroad alignment?
Is that
Chris?
I'm not familiar with that, Daniel, or
is that Daniel Harmon? Is that the one that goes to Oroville then?
No, Oroville is the extension of the Sacramento. So we come up the Sacramento subdivision into Marysville, and then we transition over onto the Valley subdivision.
I think the Cal Northern line might be kind of a historical route. I'm not sure if the right of way is still there or what. I kind of recall that might have come up sort of just west of Oroville, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay. Well, if the participant who asked the question has can provide a little additional clarity, maybe we can get back to that question. Moving on, would the train be wheelchair accessible? I think the answer there is yes. Correct me if
Yes.
I'm wrong, but yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question is, are there any risks for this not happening? So is there anything that could prevent this from not happening? So Chris, do you want to? Funding?
Yeah, I mean, I guess any project always has, some things that can upend it. I mean, it's obviously pretty dependent on state funding and also federal funding. And so those will be key things, going forward. I think, we feel pretty confident, based on the, state administration, the federal administration, if there's money available. And so maybe that's just part of the answer. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in.
If I just add in, I mean, the other real key thing here, besides funding, absolutely is required, but the other is UP. I mean, they're the owner of each line, and so that's something that I think that we've all worked really hard on. I really want to compliment BCAG for their efforts to reach out to UP very early, working with us. The relationship we have operated on UP lines for more than 2 decades, and so that kind of helps give them a confidence level. And because we already have this program with them already working on the Sacramento sub to do these improvements, it's really helped get their confidence to allow us to work together. But having UP not only allow us but also support this program is critical.
Great, thank you. Dan Levitt, this question will be for you. Is the San Joaquin service being moved entirely onto the Sacramento subdivision, or will some service still call in Sac Valley?
At this point, the plan is still to have the 2 round trips to Sac Valley Station. We right now in all of our plans, we're showing that for 2030 to continue that. The problem is that right now, we really have, there's no ability to add additional service on that line. And I'd seen someone's comment about, well, hey, you could have double tracked that line. That no, UP, even with full double tracking that line, we're not interested in additional passenger service on that line. We went that route before, earlier on, before we ever started this program with the Sacramento subdivision. We offered them to do whatever improvements were necessary along their main line in order to get additional passenger service, and they had no interest. But this Sacramento subdivision really was the only option that was there for some sort of being able to get new service in the near term, midterm up to Sacramento.
Thank you. So the next question is, once Natomas Airport Shuttle is operational, could the existing Amtrak throughway buses from CIC to SAC make a stop at the Natomas train station in order to connect with that shuttle?
I can chime in. We're actually, again, as we proceed with this study, we're going to do kind of an assessment of the whole throughway bus network as we get to rail service. So first, for when there's train service extended in Natomas as part of Valley Rail, and then what would happen after we extend trains to Chico. So yes, that's being looked at, and the plan is to provide bus service, before rail service happens. I mean, that's definitely an assumption we're making. We just have to work out some details.
Thank you.
But if I could just add on too, I mean, again, mentioning that this is really view this as a starter service. We would be looking at the opportunity to kind of supplement this for some time with some additional throughway bus round trips as well, because someone was mentioning I can't get home this time, and so it may not be the preference. Having some additional throughway bus that supplements this until the day where you're able to have a larger number of rail trips is something that helps be able to get people to be able to ride the service. We already do that today on the connection. Like, for example, Sacramento, we only have typically, again, we're down one round trip right now because of the pandemic. We expect to be back to 2 round trips later this year. But the Sacramento line is supplemented with 5 throughway bus round trips as well. And so that's something that here we would be looking at as well, to be able to supplement the service until it continues to grow beyond the 4 round trips that we're talking about.
Right. We had a question, and I can answer this one, where they can rewatch this meeting. So I mentioned earlier, but I know a number of you joined a bit later. We are recording this presentation, and we will give us a week or so, but we will have it up on the project website, a link to it, so that you can watch it again, and you can share it with your friends, family, colleagues, anybody you think might be interested in it. So Chris, this was directed directly at you. Can Beeline and the Yuba Sutter Transit work together to have a bus service between Gridley and Live Oak?
That's definitely something to consider. Yeah, I mean, we're already working with Yuba Sutter Transit as part of the study. They're part of our project development team, and so those are the kind of things we're going to be looking at, both towards kind of the end of the study, looking at some of those ideas, but also as we get closer to implementing the service, to kind of just maximize people's access to these stations. As Dan mentioned, it's tough to have a station everywhere, but if we can have good connectivity with transit from one community to the station, that's going to help a lot. So absolutely, we'll be looking at doing those types of things as we go forward.
Thank you, Chris. Dan and Chris, I know you answered this question, so I'm going to direct it to you. How would we connect to Capitol Corridor to get to the Bay Area if there isn't a stop at the Sacramento Valley Station?
Well, as I mentioned, we are going to study that for the longer term, post 2030. So that analysis is underway. In the meantime, we really looked at, well, how can it is an issue, if you did get off in like one of the Old North Sacramento or Midtown, there's ways to get to the Sac Valley station, but it's probably not the most convenient because it's like you have to do a transit connection between the two. So when we were doing our service planning, we looked at, how do we get folks to the Bay Area? So that the hub in Stockton does help with that issue. You bring trains down from North Valley to Stockton, and then they can hop. Then there's a direct connection to a San Joaquin service train to either Oakland or to, as I also mentioned, the other direction, we go down to high-speed rail. But to get that connection to the Bay Area, that's one way we dealt with that issue. So, and those same trains go to Oakland, where the Capital Corridor trains do as well. You wouldn't capture the stations in between Sacramento and Martinez, but you would be able to hit all the other stations. The travel
I just think to add to that though, I mean, so at Midtown, while it may not be as ideal as we'd like, at Midtown, there has been recent funding from the state to provide an enhanced bus connection between Sac Valley Station and the Midtown Station from RT on the bus line. There is light rail within a couple of blocks of the Midtown Station that also takes passengers to downtown. We have the connection at Old North Sacramento via light rail to downtown as well, to Sac Valley Station area. And then we also have I mentioned earlier, put in several $1 million to enhance the parking protected bikeway program of the city, so that you could get a jump bike or a scooter and be able to make that connection as well. And then there's other ways to get there. And it is actually, it's a long walk, but it can even be walked.
Okay. Is there any consideration being given to Sutter Point specific plan development as a station terminus point? And there was a follow-up comment that that's a good question. A stop could draw from adjoining Placer County developments along Baseline Road, in addition to Sutter Point near Highway 99. Do we have an answer to that, or is that something we just need to get back on?
Well, I'm certainly, along this stretch, when we get the service up and running, we can certainly, evaluate other opportunities. Right now, the Sutter Point, is a development that looks intriguing, but it isn't in there yet. So, we can't make this initial service plan start to focus on that. But if this service is up and running and developments happen, and it certainly makes sense to, investigate adding a station somewhere, then that is feasible.
Okay. Would UP share the cost of building sidings, since it would also benefit the operation of the additional freight trains?
The answer to that is no. They're not going to pony up costs, because they basically can operate their freight service how they want to right now. The idea is that the capacity improvements, the siding extensions and new sidings that they would ask for, are to allow for the passenger train slots to happen, fitting in with their existing or future planned freight service. So no, they would not be ponying up the money.
Okay. Would the freight train run on the same speed as the passenger lines?
So typically when you have these corridors like this, there are two different speeds. There's a freight speed and a passenger speed. The majority of this corridor, I believe, is already designed to operate at 79 miles per hour passenger and 70 mile per hour freight speeds.
If I could add an advantage of this line, the Sacramento subdivision, it does, UP typically will not allow more than 79 on any of their lines, but on this line, they've at least shown a willingness to potentially in the future, as this service develops over time, we might be able to increase the speed potentially up to 90 miles per hour.
Thank you. What happens when the former Western Pacific from Marysville south is out of service, say due to flooding between Marysville and Sacramento?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in any situation where you'd have a train service, whether it be flooding or an accident, sometimes they implement a bus bridge around a situation like that. This project would not be raising the railroad tracks along this whole stretch, it would be cost prohibitive. So we have to deal with what's there. If there are locations that flood occasionally, then we have to deal with it. I don't recall hearing too much going on with closures, but the freight, if flooding happens, the freight can't operate. You know, it interrupts their business, and they try not to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Daniel. So the next question is, the passenger trains themselves, will they be new trains, or are they used trains? What is that?
We are actually with the Seal Keens. We're just about to start running new trains that we're getting through the state. They're expected to start rolling out later this year, and so the Seal Keens within the next year or two will be on basically a completely new fleet. We'll have a couple of additional of the holdovers or bi-levels for some period, but then the state is looking to transition to even newer equipment in the future, looking at purchasing some ZEMU trains, which will be fully zero emission, and we're working with the state as well on zero emission locomotives. And so we expect most of the service that you'd see coming up here would be on new trains.
Daniel Hartman, we had a number of questions regarding Oroville. Can you provide a little bit of clarity on what will be happening with Oroville?
Well, basically right now, based on coordination with UP and the idea that going up to Chico will work, we are not envisioning this service, the train service, going up to Oroville, but we are definitely looking at making sure that there is a strong bus connection between Oroville and the Gridley station to serve those passengers.
Okay, thank you.
And again, let me just explain that also is what going up to Chico does is mentioned earlier, is it gives you the freedom to continue going north up to Reading and whatnot. You do not have that opportunity if you go over to Oroville.
Thank you. What is the estimated fiscal contribution by local cities for this project, if any, for this project?
I guess I'll just say that we haven't calculated any such costs at this point, and that may be something that we'll be looking at in the future. I don't know if Dan wanted to follow up on that.
At this point, on the other parts of our route, in terms of the Valley Rail program, the cities have not really had a contribution other than really looking more at how the connection at the stations to other services, and they're part of providing connectivity. And so we are looking at how to make sure that as we're working with our partners, so that at each of our stations that they do connect in with local and existing transit. And so that part of it can be considered, sort of their contribution. But again, most of the funding that we've had at this point has come through state funds.
Thank you. We've had a lot of comments about just making sure that the stations have bike facilities there, and also questions about whether or not the passengers will be able to bring their bikes onto the train. Daniel Kraus said yes. I just want to make sure that he answered it correctly. Yes, he did. Okay, good job, Daniel. So I'm trying to scoot through these. There's lots and lots of comments, and again, we appreciate your comments, and we will definitely be sharing them with the project team, even though they're looking at it right now. Are there any plans to have passenger route to West Sacramento?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think the city has looked at that for quite some time, some sort of a trolley, but that would be a separate project. So it's not part of this project, but it's something that has been West Sacramento and Sacramento have looked at that for quite some time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I think we've wrapped up all of the questions, and we are just about done for the evening. So maybe we could move to the last slide. So Again, I want to remind everyone that the presentation portion will be available on the website. I think we shared the link to the website in the chat box, but we will be more than happy to share the link with you after this meeting as well via an email. So you again can share it with everybody, because we want even more people aware of this project and involved. If you have any further questions, certainly Chris Devine has provided his email address, so please feel free to send him an email as well. And then just wanted to let you know a couple of other outreach events that we will be doing. We will be at the Buckeye event this Saturday. Hopefully it's not raining. But we will be in Marysville, and then we will also be attending the Chico's Farmers Market in March, on March 4th. We'll be asking questions, sharing information. Really want to again sort of get the word out about this project to as many people as we can. We will be following up with an online questionnaire that'll be happening later in March. Again, we have your email address, so we will be sending you a link to it. We would love it if you would share that link with everybody you know as well, so that we can get even more feedback. And with that, I want to just make sure that if John or Chris or Dan have any final comments, I'd like to give them that opportunity. So feel free to,
Thanks, Gladys. I just wanted to say thanks everyone for your time this evening and just kind of hearing the initial findings that we have for the study, and just look forward to coordinating with you all further. Like I mentioned, we're going to have another public workshop like this summer when the draft plans completed. Well, not completed, but it's fairly completed, so we can get your feedback and get your comments integrated into that draft plan. So just again, thanks for your time, and we're all, as the project team, very excited about this project and kind of anxious to get it implemented and get the service underway. So again, appreciate your time and thanks.
I just to add the same, just thank all of you who participated tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to continue to work with you and your input. And we are excited about this too. We think there's great opportunities for this service.
Okay, well, with that, we finished 2 minutes late. So again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we look forward to having further conversations with you later in the year. Thank you very much.